Well, hello and welcome to the first edition of Lies I Learned in Pharmacy School. And I'm going to try to do this once a week and update you on the progress of the book I'm writing. And the book I'm writing is called Lies I Learned in Pharmacy School. And I want to just go into a little bit of history of it first. So if you look at the bottom of the screen, my first book, Sickened, How the Government Ruined Healthcare and How to Fix It, is already available on Amazon. And here is the cover of that book and showing it in Amazon. It's available on Kindle, audiobook, and I actually did the audio myself. That was very fun. My son is the one that edited that, and he does a wonderful job. I'm so proud of Jordan. And it was a number one seller on Amazon. It was pre-released, actually Christmas Eve, 2019, and it was pre-released then, and it sold 1,400 copies the first day. Actual official release was on the 27th. And as you guys remember, it was 2019 was an interesting year, or I should say, right before a very interesting year, 2020. So little did we know in December, at least most of us, me included, did not know what was going on in 2019 in December, but the COVID virus was released in China. So, and then in 2020, it really became mainstream, and all of our lives changed after that. I don't believe any coincidences. My book came out, Sickened, How the Government Ruined Healthcare and How to Fix It. My book came out in perfect timing. COVID was perfect timing for it to come out. Although the book is just as pertinent today as it was during COVID. So, and basically, my book talked about the history of how the government got involved in healthcare in the first place. And really, when you look back, one of the first steps that they did to change the healthcare environment is they started they put a wage freeze. FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, president in during World War II, put a wage freeze on wages. And so, and of course, during the war effort, industry was booming, especially like the auto industry. General Motors, Ford, Chrysler, they were all building tanks and airplanes and bombers and all kinds of stuff for the war effort. So they needed employees. They needed them bad, but they couldn't take another employee from another entity by giving them higher wages. So what did they do? They gave them hospital insurance. Now, fast forward to what hospital insurance has become 70 years later, and now hospital insurance is basically healthcare insurance that everything is covered. And originally, that wasn't what hospital insurance was supposed to do. Like most insurances are supposed to cover for the unprepared, or something, an unprepared event, not a routine event. And healthcare insurance now pays for routine events. That's why healthcare is so expensive. So, but it also goes into the history of Medicare. In the 1960s, Medicare came in, and of course, then that's when things really, really escalated in healthcare, overutilization, increased prices, all that kind of stuff. So that's what my book goes into. The most important part is that a lot of people talk about that history of our healthcare system, but nobody really has a fix for it. They just want to complain about it. And that's no good to complain if you don't have a solution. So in my book, chapter 6, it has a 6-step solution on how to fix the system. And believe me, it's not from the government. The government has to get out of it. They ruined it. They're not going to fix it. So the solution is, it needs to come from a grassroots effort from the bottom up. Individuals need to take care of their own health. That's what they really need to do. And my book, Sickened, How the Government Ruined Healthcare and How to Fix It, was one has issues in there about educating and empowering individuals to take charge of their own health. We talk about that on our Health Solutions podcast with Sean and Janet Needham. We talk about it at our pharmacy regularly. Our pharmacy, Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy, we specialize in hormones And we even tell patients like hormones are a piece of the puzzle. You still need to work on your sleep, your diet, your exercise, all those things. So Jan and I are two pharmacists that don't believe in drugs to treat long-term disease. And actually, the forward of my book, Sickened, How the Government Ruined Healthcare and How to Fix It, Janet actually writes the forward, and she talks about a patient story of how an obese patient that she'd been working with for years, called her and told her that she was dying, and she ate herself to death. And that's when Janet and I really woke up and started wanting to be more proactive about health instead of just giving people bags of medication that never got better. So I wanted to do a follow-up book on that, and the follow-up book is called Lies I Learned in Pharmacy School and How to Escape the Grasp of Big Pharma. Now, here's the reality: is I learn new lies every day. Not all the lies were learned in pharmacy school, so I want to be very upfront about that. Because I learn new lies every day in our medical system. And I would love comments from you guys. If you guys have learned something in medicine that you feel you were lied to about, please let me know and we can talk about it. I'm welcoming all kinds of comments and questions. So please feel free to comment and ask questions. So that's the cover of my book, Lies I Learned in Pharmacy School and How to Escape the Grasp of Big Pharma. Hopefully it'll be released in December of this year. I'm in the process of writing chapter 9 right now. There was 12 chapters. Janet writes the opening chapter, and she writes a chapter on osteoporosis also. I do want to mention that I added a bonus chapter because I had a list of all this hodgepodge stuff that I think is important to include in the book, but it really didn't fit anywhere. So it's going to be a bunch of miscellaneous stuff in chapter 13. I don't know how I'm going to put that together yet, but I'm thinking about it. So, but I wanted to go through quickly, or not so quickly, some of the lies I did learn in pharmacy school. So, Janet actually writes chapter number 1, healer or drug dealer. So when you go to your doctor, are they really quick to prescribe a drug? Or are they actually healing people? As a pharmacist, I'm going to tell you, drugs don't heal people in general. Now, there are some acute drugs, antibiotics and stuff that might heal people. But for chronic disease, drugs don't heal people. Let's take a blood pressure drug, for instance. If you have hypertension or high blood pressure, giving a drug to lower your blood pressure is like putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg. I get it. Short term, it might prevent problems, especially if your blood pressure is super high. But it doesn't prevent the cause of the high blood pressure. Why do you have high blood pressure in the first place? So ask your question. Ask yourself that. Do your own research. Another common one is type 2 diabetes. I say this often on our podcast. Diabetes mellitus, which is also known as sugar diabetes. Why is it known as that? Because diabetes mellitus literally in Greek means honey siphon. It means you are urinating out sugar. So what's the fix in the American healthcare system for urinating out sugar? We just give you drugs to lower your blood sugar instead of actually fixing the problem. Diabetes mellitus, type 2. Type 1 is different, but type 2 diabetes is caused from eating too much sugar. So one of the ways to prevent it is don't eat sugar. It's not a drug deficiency. Most chronic diseases, I don't use fatalistic terms very often, but I'm going to say all chronic diseases are not a drug deficiency. Think about that. Drugs have been around for largely 70 years, some of them over 100. Now, plant-based solutions have been around for a long time, but that's a good point, right? God gave us plants to eat for medicine. Hippocrates or Gale, I can't remember, said, make medicine your food and food be thy medicine. So we've known that for years. But Big Pharma is good at trying to isolate the active ingredient of a drug from a plant, of active ingredient from a plant that's been used for years to help heal people. And that is the paradox of modern day Big Pharma. is that plant doesn't have one active ingredient. Let's use white willow bark, for instance, with acetylsalicylic acid, also known as aspirin. There's not one active ingredient in there. We think we know, but we don't know. There's a lot of other ingredients in there that might help the drug work synergistically, or other ingredients to prevent side effects. So when you try to isolate one active ingredient, you have problems. So chapter 2, I wrote this chapter. The slides aren't coming out very well as far as being formatted on the screen, but cholesterol causes heart attacks. This is one of the things that Janet and I first started questioning over 20 years ago. This is one of the drugs. Cholesterol is concentrated in our brain. It's in every cell in our body. 80% of the cholesterol in our body is produced from our bodies endogenously. 80% of it is produced in our liver, not from what we eat. Yet we're told to eat. Don't eat red meat. Don't eat saturated fat. Don't eat animal products. Don't eat eggs because they're high in cholesterol. Yet 80% of the cholesterol is made up in our own bodies. So are you telling me God got it wrong? God made up a substance in our bodies to cause heart attacks. I'm not buying it. The yolk of a chicken egg is concentrated in cholesterol to sustain a baby chicken. And we're going to call it bad? Breast milk is concentrated in cholesterol. Newborn babies have high cholesterol. We're going to call it bad? I'm just not buying it at all. I think cholesterol is necessary for life. We will die without it. It helps to normalize our hormones. Most all the sex hormones come from a cholesterol backbone. Without cholesterol, we will die. So statins to lower cholesterol, they're great at lowering cholesterol. They've been out since 1987 for almost 40 years, and yet cardiovascular disease is at an all-time high in America. So they're not working. That alone should be a red flag. So that's chapter 2. Chapter 3, this is a controversial subject, but vaccines save lives. Let's realize that most vaccines have been out for, actually most of them have only been out for about 40 years, since 1986. That's a whole other story. You got to read my book to figure out why. It's very nefarious and sad, and we've been duped. But anyway, I always say this: plumbers have saved more lives than vaccines, doctors, and antibiotics combined. Modern day sanitation, largely that came about in the late 1800s with clean water supplies, dirty water being separated from clean water, hand washing, running water, all that stuff. When that happened in the late 1880s in developed countries like the United States, infectious disease rates went down from bacteria, from viruses, measles, mumps, rubella, polio, all that stuff went down. Yet we think that vaccines are what did it, and it's just absolutely not the case. So, and let's just think about this: that our bodies have been fighting viruses and bacteria for thousands of years. God gave us a good immune system. If we take care of it, it works very well. So realize that. And if some virus, name a virus, whether it's a coronavirus, whether it's a polio virus, if it was going to wipe out humanity, it would have done it thousands of years ago. There's no such thing as a brand new virus. There might be mutations of it, but usually those mutations go back to the original form. They do mutate somewhat, but they always go back to the original form. That's just how you learn that in virology. Yeah, we've been duped. That's chapter 3. Chapter 4, the government is not your doctor. We can't look to solutions from the government to fix our health, okay? In fact, I would argue that the government caused the health problem. Let's just think about this with the food pyramid. I already hit on it a little bit with cholesterol, but for years, the government told us that we needed to eat more grains and less saturated fat, less dairy products. Eggs were bad, all those things. And now just recently, within the last, few months, the government basically flipped that on its side and said, oh, well, we had the food pyramid wrong, so we're changing it. And now, the seed oils are bad, and red dye number 5. I mean, the government's telling us all these things that are bad and they're going to outlaw them and all this kind of stuff. And it's just a reminder, if they can flip something 180 degrees like that, then how can we trust them? That's really the question that we have to ask. How can we really trust them? So we can't trust the government for our health. We have to educate ourselves and empower ourselves. We can't trust the government for our health. And that also is a reminder that, the government, whether it be a licensed pharmacist, whether it be a licensed doctor, just because they're a licensed professional and they went to school doesn't mean that they're an expert on your health. They might be an expert on drug therapy, but like I just mentioned earlier, drugs are not usually the answer to cure or to heal chronic disease. All right, what's the next chapter? Type 2 diabetes is a drug deficiency. I already kind of spoil alert with this one. But type 2 diabetes is a carbohydrate metabolism problem, period. Now, type 1 is also a carbohydrate metabolism problem. Type 1 diabetics, they lack enough insulin. Type 2 diabetics have too much insulin, but their bodies aren't sensitive to insulin. They both respond the same way, and they urinate out sugar. That's why it's called diabetes mellitus. But they do manifest differently. That being said, I didn't say this earlier. It is important to limit your carbohydrate consumption, whether you have type 2 or type 1 diabetes. I get a lot of pushback from that. The reality of it is, in our system today, we are taking type 1 diabetics. We tell them to eat 80% carbs. That's what the dietitian tells them. And so their blood glucose are super high. And then we tell them, hey, you've got a continuous blood glucose monitor that hooks to your insulin pump. It'll just pump more insulin into your system. Yeah, you're right. Is that good? No. We know high insulin is more dangerous than high glucose. High insulin is probably the biggest marker of cardiovascular, of metabolic health than anything. So if there's one test that you can get done to measure your metabolic health, I would say it's a fasting insulin. More important than your fasting glucose or blood sugar. It will catch diabetes before your fasting glucose will. So get your fasting insulin checked. It should be below 8. Optimal should be below 5. But if your insulin is high, and even if your blood glucose is normal, then chances are you probably already have diabetes. And the good thing is it is reversible. That's another thing. If you go to a doctor and they tell you type 2 diabetes is not reversible, it's time to get a new doctor. Another lie I learned in pharmacy school. Remember, during pharmacy school, I was in pharmacy school in the 90s. In the early 90s, Prozac was the only SSRI, serotonin reuptake, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. It increases serotonin in the brain. And we were taught that that's the key to treating depression. Prozac was really big during the early 90s. And then, of course, Zoloft came out and Celexa, because once Prozac went generic, they had to find another thing to sell. So they patent one that has a chemical structure like it. And let's realize this: 40 in the trials of the SSRIs, 45% of patients responded to placebo. And yet these drugs are out on the market and being prescribed like candy. The biggest thing that you can do to treat depression, the biggest treatment for depression is exercise. Exercise releases more neurotransmitters than we even know. Exercise outside, even better. You'll get vitamin D. You'll get all kinds of benefits from exercising outside. So, and if you read my book, I go into the history of drug treatment before the SSRIs, with tricyclic antidepressants and even some of the Nardil, old school antidepressant drugs. So you have to read my book. Next chapter: your gut is not broken, your diet is. How many diseases do we have that are related to the gut? Ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, reflux, and I love this one, IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. That one is so good because in the name, it even says BS, which I say it's a BS diagnosis. Irritable bowel syndrome, you know what? If any of us eat the wrong foods, we'll get irritable bowel syndrome. We don't need a drug to prevent that. We need to not eat those foods. And for everybody, it's different. So you need to find out what that is. I'm going to say this. Any GI, gastrointestinal disease, any gastrointestinal disease is related to your diet, period. Now, there are gastroenterologists that'll say that's crazy. Crohn's disease is genetic. You can't prevent it. There are many, many patients, some that we have interviewed, that were on all these $1 million drugs, literally. It was costing $1 million a year. And the guy changes, and they weren't working. The guy changed his diet, and next thing you know, his Crohn's goes into remission. So don't buy it that your diet does not matter. And diet relates to most all kinds of problems, whether it be your GI problems or others. Next chapter. This one's controversial too, because it seems like everybody has an ADHD diagnosis. Attention deficit hyperactive disorder. I believe it's also kind of a BS diagnosis. Now, some people argue about that, but here's the thing. I think in general, all of us have a little bit of ADHD, and I think in some ways that keeps us productive. I do go into the history of ADD and when it used to only be a childhood diagnosis. Back 30 plus years ago, it was mostly a childhood diagnosis. But the problem with that is then they can only sell drugs to children. So then they created, and then ADD kind of had a bad connotation with it. So they changed it to ADHD, and then they made it an adult diagnosis also. So they could sell more drugs, essentially. And they had all these fancy question and answer sheets. Do you have ADHD? And they would give them to doctors. The drug companies would give them to doctors, and then it was a diagnosis tool for ADHD. You know what the best treatment is for ADHD? Exercise. If you're feeling overactive, exercise, movement. Oh yeah, you guys will love this one. I just got done writing this. This chapter is in the process of being written right now. We are under treating chronic pain. I think probably all of you guys can relate to this. It's everybody knows probably a family member or a friend or somebody over the last 20 years that got addicted to oxycodone or Oxycontin. And that's where it really all stems from. Back in the early 90s, when we were in pharmacy school, we were taught very heavily that we're under treating chronic pain, especially in the elderly. And if you're truly in pain, you won't get addicted. And I got to be honest with you guys, I bought it all. I drank the Kool-Aid. I'm like, yeah, that's true. So I was recommending, high doses of Oxycontin for people that are in chronic pain. And I was an accessory to the crime. There's no doubt about it. And now look at what we've created. We created an opioid epidemic, so now we're kind of trying to get out of that now. And so now there's government agencies. And remember, the government caused the problem in the first place. Purdue Pharma, who was responsible for Oxycontin, they manipulated the data. The FDA approved it. And it's still, and next thing you know, we got the opioid epidemic. And read my book for some of the details, some of the stories in there. It's crazy. But now what do we have? Big Pharma is good at this. They're good at creating a problem and then having a drug to treat that problem. So now we have Suboxone. And by the way, I am not judging anybody that's on any drug at all. I do this out of love, and I do this out of just, I want people to get their own information so they can be educated and they can empower themselves to be in charge of their own health. And a lot of times that means that they can be drug free, because taking a drug for the rest of your life is not very empowering. So what do we have? We have Suboxone now. So for all these people that we got addicted to Oxycontin, now we have Suboxone. and they can be on that for the rest of their life. I mean, you can't make this up. This is Big Pharma's story over and over again. Synthetic drugs are the best option for treating osteoporosis. This chapter has not been written yet. Janet is responsible for writing this chapter, and she has a passion for this. Osteoporosis is not a drug deficiency. The drugs that we have on the market, the biphosphonates, Fosamax, Actonel, they don't make your bone stronger. In fact, they cause osteonecrosis, osteo meaning bone, necrosis meaning death. They cause your bones to be more brittle. So when you do have a fracture, it shatters your hip or your femur. And it is so bad that when you go to the dentist, they will ask you if you're on one of those drugs. And if you are, they refuse to pull your teeth because they noticed that they were shattering people's jaws when they pulled their teeth. So Prolia and Forteo, Prolia works the same way, kind of the same way, causes osteonecrosis. But hey, let's make another drug, Forteo. And Forteo actually can treat osteoporosis and treat osteonecrosis. You can't make this up. So you give a drug to cause osteonecrosis, drug company says, oh, sorry, we did that, but now we have another drug to treat it. The reality of it is osteoporosis is normally a hormone deficiency. It can be caused by giving other drugs like prednisone, for instance, corticosteroids. So whether it be women or whether it be men, they usually lack hormones that causes osteoporosis. Mostly testosterone. Testosterone is an anabolic hormone. It helps to grow lean body mass, but also helps to grow bone. It's anabolic to tissue. So estrogen is important also. Testosterone does convert to estrogen. That's a whole other story. Next chapter. Hormones cause cancer. First of all, hormones is a very generic term. Insulin's a hormone, for instance. Adrenaline's a hormone, for instance. Yes, estrogen is a hormone. Testosterone's a hormone. We have to qualify what hormones are and that they're not all created equal. Premarin is a hormone. Premarin comes from pregnant mare's urine, high in estrogen. It's isolated out of urine. Estrogen's isolated out of urine. It is not natural to our bodies. It's natural to a horse. So to say it causes cancer is to say the hormones that our body makes up, like estradiol, like progesterone, like testosterone, to say that those hormones cause cancer is ridiculous. Do you really honestly think that God put something in our body to cause cancer? I believe that cancer is a metabolic health problem, no different than cardiovascular disease, no different than most of the chronic diseases in our country. They're cardiovascular health, they're metabolic health problems. You correct your metabolic health, and you will correct most of your diseases. And let's say this too. Birth control pills are synthetic estrogen progestins. They are not the same as hormone replacement therapy. They are synthetic, and yes, they do cause cancer. There's no doubt about it. I think a lot of breast cancers, I think a lot of uterine cancers, I think a lot of those were caused from birth control pills. And I think we have a chapter on that. This chapter goes into that. So what I want to see, yeah. So what should I have been taught in pharmacy school? Well, what I really should have been taught in pharmacy school, but let's remember who donates to the pharmacy school. It's the drug companies. What should I have been taught in pharmacy school? I really should have been taught that most diseases, chronic diseases in our country, are caused from our lifestyle, mostly diet, and lack of movement. But I will say this, you can't exercise your way out of a poor diet. It's impossible. So I should have been taught that, change your diet, change your life. And eat real food. It's that simple. Eat real food. If it doesn't rot, don't eat it. Do what our ancestors did. What did our great, great, great ancestors do? Did they eat out of a box? No, they didn't eat ultra processed food. They ate meat. They ate eggs. They ate vegetables and fruits they picked out of the garden in season. They didn't have peaches to eat all year long, or strawberries or bananas. No, they didn't have that. Now, I guess if you lived on the equator, you would have bananas year round. But you still have to harvest them yourself. And that's part of the issue, is that not only do we not have to Not only do we have an unlimited food supply in the grocery store, usually in our pantries actually, but we don't even have to go to the grocery store anymore. We just order DoorDash. That's a problem. One thing I want to clear up too is about genetics. So many times we are told in medicine, oh, you just have bad genes. Nothing you can do about it. You got cardiovascular disease runs or diabetes runs in your family. You need to take this drug. Well, that is true. As far as you might have bad genes, and we cannot change our genetics, but we can change the way our genes are expressed. It's called epigenetics. Our environment around us. What are we doing daily to change our gene expression? What we eat, how we sleep, how we move matters. It matters a lot. So when somebody tells you that, oh, it's just genetic, there's nothing you can do about it, you can change the way your genes are expressed. I always go to one of the simplest life forms, which is a bacteria. Bacteria do it all the time. So I'm going to use a common bacteria, Staphylococcus aureus. So it will produce what's called penicillinase in the presence of penicillin only. So it'll turn on a gene or a protein. Proteins genes are made up of proteins. It'll have a protein that'll make penicillinase, which is an enzyme to break down penicillin. Okay, Staphylococcus aureus will only do that in the presence of penicillin. When the penicillin is gone, or a version of penicillin, amoxicillin, or whatever, when the penicillin is gone, it'll stop producing penicillinase. That's an example of how gene expression has changed. Our bodies are no different than a bacteria, just a lot more complicated. But the overall proteins and all that kind of stuff, it's pretty much the same. So we can change our genetic expression. So remember that. So that's my book in summary. Here's some information if you want to get a hold of me. There's my email that I'm streaming up there. I'm going to have one of these once a week, and I'm going to just do daily things about what I learn in medicine every day or week that really is just probably more of a lie. So anyway, tune in every week. I think I'm going to have it on Fridays, 8 a.m., but tune in, follow me on social media, my personal Facebook page, Sean Needham. Also will be streaming on the Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy page, the Health Solutions page, also the Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy YouTube, and Sean Needham's X, and the Health Solutions with Sean Needham on Instagram. So just stream there live now. So if you like this, comment, share with somebody that might want to hear this. And I'm going to go more into detail about the individual diseases and stuff as we progress through this. So I thank you for tuning in today. This is Lies I Learned in Pharmacy School and How to Escape the Grasp of Big Pharma. My goal, as always, is to educate and empower individuals to take charge of their own health. Text on the bottom of the screen, text LIES, LIES, to 833-495-3426. LIES to 833-495-3426. Opt in for the updates, and we'll be doing updates on each chapter. So thank you for tuning in today. Tune in next Friday, 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Thank you.